Hey everyone, it's Wolfgang. Some good news about the U.S. economy. We're getting towards the best U.S. economy in the near future. We're sort of evolving in that direction, so I thought I would describe this, cover this. So the U.S. is the largest economy in the world. It's 40% larger than the number two economy, China. Huge economy, and part of the reason is it's consumer-based. The economy is 70% based on consumer spending. That's why businesses tend to be strong here, because the majority of the spending is from consumers, not government. So there is growth currently in the U.S. economy. Companies and consumers, citizens, are spending right now. It's pretty evident that companies and consumers both feel confident enough to spend money. That's number one. There is new innovation and there's deregulation because of the new U.S. government. Number two and number three. Number one, companies and citizens are spending. Number two, there's new innovation. Number three, deregulation. Artificial intelligence, machine learning is only a part of that. So the economy tends to grow if these three things are present. If companies and citizens are spending, if there's innovation, and especially if there's deregulation, reducing the number of rules, the economy will start to grow. And the economy is showing signs of growth. It's not perfect, but the expectation is we are heading in the right direction. We're ramping up, and things are looking up. These three things indicate the growth. This indicates that businesses and consumers feel confident. That is a really key thing. Compared to the inflation years, when people were a little bit concerned about the inflation, signs of growth in the U.S. economy that I'm going to explain here in a couple seconds. That means businesses and consumers are feeling confident enough about the economy to spend. So the rate of growth, the expectation is the U.S. economy will grow 3% this year. Now, 3% may not sound like much, but that beats 20 of the past 40 years of growth, annual growth in the U.S. economy. So if you look at the past 40 years, only 20 of those did better than a 3% growth rate. And most of the time, they did not exceed 3% by too much. So there are signs that the economy is growing. Now, the one caveat to that is the winter was pretty hard this year. So the first 2 months of this year, that affected the economic growth adversely, but things are ramping up. There are signs that, if you look up this statistic online, GDP growing 3% per year in the U.S., this is what you'll find. So why is there optimism in the economy? Because in order to have spending, there has to be optimism. When there's a lot of inflation and people are concerned, they stop spending unless they absolutely have to buy something, right? So some reasons for optimism. One big issue is businesses have more money to spend because the tax cuts have been extended. Tax cuts take less money away from businesses so they can afford to invest in their growth, growing their business. Another issue that's leading to optimism, foreign importers are already creating new U.S. jobs. They've known since last year, November, whenever the new government got elected, they knew the tariffs were coming, right? So it's been November, December, January, February, March, April, May. May's almost over. So it's been 7 months that these companies have been able to know that they're going to relocate to the U.S. And so a lot of new U.S. jobs have already been created by companies that are evading the tariffs. They're evading the tariffs by creating jobs in the U.S. instead of back home. And some of the dominant areas where jobs are being created, automotive, electronics, pharmaceuticals, those are three biggies right now. And as we go along here, more and more companies, because if you look online and you want to see a list of all the companies who have announced relocating a part of their production to the U.S., it's a very long list of companies. And many of them are already here and starting to create jobs. And that's only going to get better. So the reasons for optimism, businesses now have more money to spend. Foreign importers are already creating new jobs. So why is that a reason for being optimistic? Because when more jobs are created in the U.S. economy, that means more citizens have employment and have the ability to spend. And as I mentioned earlier, the U.S. economy, 70% of it, 70%, comes from consumer spending. So if more jobs are being created and more people have money to spend, companies will do better. So, and consumers obviously will do better also. So what are some of the signs that things are improving? Consumer spending is 4% higher now in 2025. Consumer spending has increased. Gas prices, record low gas prices. I don't know if you remember not too long ago what gas prices were doing, but it's now the total opposite. Memorial Day had record low gas prices. And why is that important for consumers? Because we all drive, and when you have to drive to work every day and you're always visiting the gas station, you know how much money you're spending on gas. You know how big of a chunk it's taking out of your spendable income. So gas prices are at a record low. The energy sector, all the energy businesses in the U.S. are being deregulated. That means regulations are being canceled. And whenever regulations are canceled, it usually means it becomes easier for energy to be produced. So, for example, nuclear energy is starting to ramp up now, and cheaper energy is becoming available due to the deregulation. U.S. oil production is at a record high because of deregulation. So when gas prices drop, it not only affects consumers, it affects companies too, right? Because if companies spend money for shipping, or anytime a company has a company vehicle, right? And many companies have fleets of vehicles. So lower energy prices is good for consumers and companies. So companies are optimistic because inflation is down and consumers are spending. Like I said, consumers are spending 4% more in 2025. So inflation is being reduced, and the one caveat to inflation is the tariffs are still a little bit unsettled. They're still being worked on. For example, the European Union is now in heavy negotiations with the U.S. because they want to avoid a 50% tariff that will take place on July 5th, I believe, is when that kicks in. So companies are optimistic because there's no internal or external problem, right? There's no inflation anymore. I mean, almost nothing. There's no stock market crash. There's no great financial crisis, mortgage problem. There's nothing that's hurting the U.S. economy in a big way. Inflation's out of the picture. Stock market is healthy. And consumers are spending. When consumers are spending, it's much easier for companies to be profitable. Companies know that the new U.S. government has a bias to deregulate everything. So they know that if they invest in growth, it's not going to be regulated away from them. They're not going to be prohibited by the government from becoming more efficient and also being more profitable. And to that point, 60% of U.S. businesses are planning to invest in their growth this year in 2025, according to the S&P Global Flash PMI and also the Small Business Optimism Index, NFIB. So there's a lot of reasons for the U.S. economy to be in improving conditions. It's not quite perfect, right? But when a new government comes in and begins deregulating, that's always a good sign, especially the energy sector, because energy affects the entire economy. It affects all consumers. It affects all businesses. And the innovation of artificial intelligence and machine learning and so on is increasing the need for energy. Nuclear energy is starting to ramp up again. So there are a lot of great things happening in the U.S. economy. And so we've got these things going for us. Consumers and companies are spending, innovation, and deregulation. So there's a lot to look forward to as we go forward in the economy. And I just wanted to cover this because you really have to compare and contrast from recent times when there was a lot of inflation and everybody was concerned about that inflation. Gas prices were high. Now, the only thing about gas prices, I want to make sure I mention this, okay? So if you're in California, where we live for a very long time, California has its own special blend of gasoline. And so their gas prices are sort of disconnected from the rest of the U.S. So gas prices are at a record low in almost all of the country, not California, because California has their own blend of gasoline. Take it or leave it. If you don't like that. One of the things we did before we moved out of California, in 2015, we created a list of reasons to leave and reasons to stay. We worked on that list. We added things to it for 2 years. And at the end of those 2 years, the gasoline prices and the special gas blend that California had was one of the reasons why we decided to leave, because it was always like $2 a gallon more than anywhere else. If you're commuting or if you have business vehicles, that starts to get annoying. the fact that, okay, you're in this state that just happens to have its own gas, like a foreign country or something, and they're charging you through the nose for the gas. So that got old. So I'm sorry if you're living in California, this doesn't really apply to you. But some of the companies that are producing jobs now and in the future in the U.S. To avoid the tariffs: Volvo, Hyundai, Honda, LG Electronics, BMW, Nissan, and a lot of other companies. Like I said, the main sectors: automotive jobs, electronics jobs, pharmaceuticals jobs. So there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic. The employment scene is improving. New jobs are being created. And the deregulation, if you compare now to 6 months from now, it's going to be pretty shocking how much better things will be in the next 6 months. So if you have any questions about this, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have in the comments. And I really want to thank everyone for watching. Best wishes to everyone. Happy Memorial Day. And thank you kindly for watching. Have a great day.